All right, it is Tuesday evening, and I am back for two nights in a row. Just talking about some of the endeavors that I am a part of. I have started. Last night it was all about how you can become a Medicare insurance agent. If you do not know who I am Renarda Jones. I am a pharmacist and I am an entrepreneur. Right now, I have probably about 10 businesses that I've started or ran in my lifetime. And so we'll talk about some of that tonight. And I often get asked the question of how did I leave corporate America and start my own consulting business? And so, usually, when I'm out at conferences and things of that nature, people will ask me at the dinner table or they're asking me in line at the bar. And so, I think it might be interesting for other people to know how I got here and if they're interested, how they can also do it as well. So tonight's going to be very informal. It's not going to be long. I don't have any slides like I did last night. It's just really going to be a conversation. So if you do have any questions or any comments, feedback, please drop them in the chat. I am using the Riverside software, so I know it's a little lag between when I'm talking and you're actually seeing it. But I will get around to it and be able to answer your questions. Excuse me. So let's just go ahead and start out. And I'm going to start from how I actually look at opportunities. And so I'm always the type person who's looking for problems. And problems can, for me, can come in one or two ways. It's either there's a problem or there's a gap in the market that needs a solution. And so wherever there's a gap, for me, there is an opportunity because that gap means once somebody finds a solution, they can sell that solution if it is something of value. The other way I look at finding opportunities as an entrepreneur is I'm always looking at the middleman. So if there is a middleman that is doing something, I want to know how they're doing it and can I do it better and can I do it for a lower cost or more value at the same cost. Okay, so I'll give you an example. One of my first businesses was a staffing agency. And so I started it, I was literally working at Costco for a staffing agency at the time for I think it was RPH on the go, and I was working there, and they had just opened the store in Greenville, and I was working there as a pharmacist. We were not doing anything, y'all, because the store had just opened, so we might have been filling 12, 15 prescriptions a day, not a lot at all. Well, anyways, I was sitting in the back as we are about ready to close, and I was reading a book, and the technician was preparing the invoices, and she was like, "Oh, the guy that was here last night, he wasn't that great." She said, "I wish you could come every night." And she said, "It's a shame we pay that much, and then they don't do that anything for us." And I was like, "Well, shoot, how much you paying him?" And so she told me, and I was like, "Well, I know I'm not getting paid that much. And if I'm providing better service than who the other people that they're sending, how can I too just do this for myself?" So that night, I literally went home and I started my first LLC. It could have, I'm pretty sure that was my very first business. It was called RMJ Pharmacy Solutions. And the tagline was providing extra and then dash ordinary services. And so from there, what I did was I called the Board of Pharmacy and I got a list of all the pharmacies, independent pharmacies in the state of South Carolina. It came with addresses, and I got in my car and I just traveled the state of South Carolina, knocking on doors, passing out cards, business cards, and little magnets, refrigerator magnets that had my information on it. And had logo and all this kind of stuff. So shout out to Cornelius Cackley. He was the first person to do that logo, and several more for me after that. Actually, even the PCN logo he did. So, anyways, went out, and there was probably about 300 pharmacists on the list. I only got to about 55 before I started getting phone calls and people wanting me to actually come in and staff their pharmacy. So I quit marketing and I went in and I started working. And one of the things that we prided ourselves on was I'm going to go into your pharmacy. I'm going to learn all the systems. So I'm going to know how to put the prescription in. I'm going to know how to run the cash register. I'm going to know how to count. I'm going to answer the phones, be able to know everything that goes on so that when their customers are coming in, they don't know the difference between me working as a floater or temporary pharmacist and the actual pharmacy owner or pharmacist that usually works there. So that's what we prided ourselves on. And that was going to help build relationships with the technicians, the cashiers, and the staff along with the customers because they didn't miss a beat. And I remember this one particular story. This pharmacist that we helped out of Spartanburg, he had his daughter had just gotten married. He hadn't seen them. I think she had gotten married, but I know he hadn't seen them in a while. And he never could find anybody to work his store. And so when we came in, I remember his wife telling us how much she appreciated the fact that he now trusted us enough to be in his store so that he could actually go on vacation. Okay, so that's one of those stories that will always resonate with me. And so that's literally how that got started. And so you probably think, well, Renata, how did you price it? Well, the way I priced it was I already knew how much they were paying the company that I was working for. And then I know how much I needed to make in order for me to be able to work. And so what I did was I just undercut it. Okay. So it was like $60 an hour, $65 an hour is what I was charging. I think I charged mileage. I can't remember. Versus the other company was charging anywhere from upwards of $75 to $95 an hour to do work at that time. So that's what I did. And then it got to the point where other pharmacies was calling me and I didn't have the capacity to be, of course, in two places at one time. So then I started soliciting my friends. And then they came on who were pharmacists to fill in shifts. And so the way I persuaded people was I was like, hey, look, if you need to buy Christmas stuff, you need new tires for your car, anything that you just need on a part-time basis without dipping into your regular money, then you can come over here and work for me and earn some extra hours. So at one point, I had about 8 other pharmacists in the field working along with me. And then what's interesting, Costco came on as one of our clients, and that was the only corporate account I had, but we did have Costco come on as one of our clients. Okay, so that's how I did RMJ Pharmacy Solutions, and I stayed there for probably about 2.5 years, and I got bored with it. And so I shut it down and pretty sure I went back to CVS. So I always have a home to go to, what I like to call it, a job home or pharmacy home to go back to, and usually that was CVS at the time. And so let's fast forward to when I started working at Blue Cross. That was in 2012. I was the director of their Medicare program for the pharmacy side, and I absolutely loved it. I probably would have stayed there forever. However, God knew that I had an entrepreneurial spirit and that I could be of better service outside of corporate America than I was inside. So I stayed 5 years, got loads and tons of experience, and then I took that and I translated it over into a consulting business. Now, what happened was because I was on the inside working, I could already know what problems there were. I could already see the gaps. I could already see what the vendors were doing and what they were lacking. So remember early when I first started this, I told you 2 reasons and 2 ways I find problems is one, is there a gap, meaning there's no solution? And two, is there a vendor that's supplying a solution, but it's not doing it the way that they should, so that middleman could be better. And so that's exactly what I did with my current company, which is PCENT Incorporated. Shouts out to Cornelius again, my image appeals, who also did that logo. And so what we do is we help Medicare insurance plans like Blue Cross South Carolina. We help them with their quality scores or their star ratings. And whenever Medicare plan sponsors or insurance companies reach a certain quality rating, then they're able to have funding from the government to help provide better benefits to the beneficiaries that they serve. So right now, literally when we started, I was the only person making phone calls, and right now we're up to about 30 employees. So I'm very proud of that. And so some of the tips that I tell folks when you're getting ready to transition, or if you're thinking about transition, do not neglect those relationships that you made while you're on your job. If you're right now an employee and you're an individual contributor, it is absolutely necessary, regardless if you are thinking of starting your own business, it is absolutely necessary for you to be sure that you are building relationships while you're there, you're forging partnerships, you're breaking down silos to know what is going on in other departments. That's one of the reasons why I think I am such a good consultant at what I do, is because when I was in corporate America, I didn't just focus on what was going on in my area. I wanted to know what was going on in marketing. I wanted to know what was going on in provider services. I wanted to know how actuary came up with the benefit design. So I was all throughout all the departments. What's operations? What's the customer service like? How do you run a call center? So all of that stuff I wanted to be involved with, and that has made me a well-rounded consultant now because I'm a pharmacist, so I know what it means to work in the pharmacy. I've got the managed care insurance experience, so I know what that looks like. I've done doctor detailing before, so I'm able to put all the pieces of the puzzle together to help whoever that person is. So, if you are an individual contributor right now and you're thinking of maybe you want to get promoted, in my opinion, one of the best ways to get promoted is to learn other areas so that you can actually build up your value to that particular company so that you can actually move up. The other thing that I would recommend when you're getting ready to transition is thinking about finances. Okay, if you know me, you know I'm a pretty risky person sometimes. I don't ever look at the job as the reason why I have provisions. I look to God for that, and I just think He gives jobs and opportunities as the vessel, but they're not necessarily the source. And so I tell people, be careful how you move, so you may not be able to move like me. I have a saying: when I eat, my family eats. So basically, I don't have any kids. So if I leave and I don't have 6 months of savings saved up from a job and I go and start something, I'm the only person I got to feed. Okay. So just be mindful of what your finances look like if you are planning to make this move. Because what I will tell you is it took us 18 months before we got our first paying client. So when I started this business, it took us 18 months to get our first client. So that was a long 18 months, y'all. I was working at CVS part time. It got so bad in the summer that I actually had to pick up another job at Walmart in York, South Carolina, and I absolutely hated it. Excuse me. So just be mindful of what your finances look like and what you actually need. Because if you're thinking that you're going to leave your job and you're going to start a consulting business and you're out of the gate going to have this clientele, that's not always the case. Okay. Now, if you have some people that you already know that's barking at your door and asking you to do it, then you may be fine. That just was not our story. The other piece of advice I would give you is to follow the need and follow the money. So, when we first started this business, we started it promoting and building out a software to help plan sponsors do better in an audit. But that wasn't really the hot topic at the time. Quality was. And so we spent time doing something that wasn't going to sell versus getting into something that was going to sell. So you want to make sure that you're looking for the needs of the population and what the money is going to flow with that versus just saying, hey, this would be cool for me to have. Yes, it was a gap. Yes, it was a need, but it wasn't a gap and a need that was more than the quality piece of it. And there was no money tied to it. Now, if they had some really bad performance issues, of course, they got penalized, but that may only come, of course, during the audit period, so it wasn't that big of a deal at the time. The other thing about building relationships and partnerships, well, guess who one of our first clients was once we started the consulting business 18 months later? Our first client became Blue Cross. Okay. So that's another reason why it's very important that you do a good job when you're on these jobs. It's very important for you to build these relationships because all the rest of our clients are people that I met and engaged with while I was at that particular job. Okay. So they remembered me from there and it just spread like, I ain't gonna call it wildfire, maybe a little brush fire. But anyways, so I'm very pleased with the way it turned out. Entrepreneurship it can get lonely. It is a lot of hard work. I don't know why people think because you work for yourself, you can sleep all day. You don't have to you don't have to get up in the morning and go to work. You can just sleep whenever you want to. You can take days off. You can't do that all the time, okay? And a matter of fact, we actually work harder and usually for less pay. It literally took about 3.5 years, maybe 4 years. Yeah, it took about 4 years before I got the salary from this company that I had when I left Blue Cross. Okay, so that's very important. So not only are you working more hours, but you're highly possible that you're going to be working more hours for less money. Um, see what else I got on here. Um, So the 5 P's that you'll hear me talk about all the time, now that I've come up with this framework, is the 5 P's of success for anyone if that wants to be an entrepreneur or already an entrepreneur and have a small business, is good problem solving skills. And then you hire the right people to help solve those problems and implement the solution. You've got to have the right process in place to not only solve the problem that you have been hired to do, but also to make sure that that process is not discouraging to your right people. Okay, so they need a process to be able to follow. The process can be enhanced by having the right platform or technology. So you want to make sure that you have the correct systems in place so that your employees and the people that you hired are not frustrated because they can't execute the process because they don't have the right technology or platform. And then you want to build partnerships. I cannot stress building partnerships enough. And all of that always has to be done with extraordinary customer service. If you know me well enough, you hear me all the time say, if everybody would just do what was right, we would be living in a place of peace and harmony. But people don't always want to do what's right. And so if you lead with doing what's right, doing what is best for the customer, and the customer doesn't necessarily, like for us, it doesn't necessarily mean the beneficiary that's on the phone. It doesn't necessarily mean the client, the health plan that's paying us. It's anybody we come into contact with. So when we're calling a pharmacy and saying, hey, we saw this rejected today, here's the information that you need for it to go through. We're not calling at 5 o'clock in the day because guess what? Pharmacies are busy at 5 o'clock in the day. So we're being mindful of our customer service on all fronts, just so that you can, if you experience and you actually display customer service 100% of the time, all the way around, you don't have to worry about turning it on and turning it off, just because the person that you're serving is not the person that's actually writing you your check. And so those are some of the reasons how this is some of how I actually became a consultant, how I worked in this entrepreneurial space. A lot of people may not realize, but when I left Blue Cross during those 18 months, I actually got into real estate. And so that's where two more of my companies came. I had one company formed for the rental properties and another company formed for the houses that we flipped. And so during that time, we spent some time in San Antonio. I studied under Armando Montalongo, which was he did the show Flip This House. And so we went out there probably 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I don't know. It felt like we was in San Antonio a lot. And so the amount of money that we paid to be in that training allowed us to, once we got out and got ready to flip a house, you got this loan from what they call hard money lenders. And I remember it distinctly. We were applying for a house over here off of in Coldstream, and whenever I talked to the hard money lender, they were asking me, what is this your first flip? Yes. And they're asking me all these questions, and the guy was like, and I gave him my certificate showing him that I was a master mentor student with Armando Montalongo, and the certificate of completion. And he said, well, if you paid this much money and you went under Armando, who is very reputable for flipping houses, then we're absolutely going to give you the loan. And so that's how we built that relationship with that person, making sure we made our payments on time, making sure we did what we were supposed to do. And so whenever I got with PCN and started to do the managed care course, I had the same thing in mind. If I'm going to launch a managed care course and nobody's really knowing who we are in the space, the whole point of around the pricing part of it was so people would, if they were getting ready to hire you and you said you completed our course, they would say, oh, well, if you paid X amount of dollars and you trained under Renata at PCN, then absolutely we think you have the experience requirements that you need. Now, just because you do that doesn't mean that always works, okay? So that's another thing about entrepreneurship. There's some things that you're going to put out there into the market and they're not going to work. And are you going to say, oh, well, I'm not really good at that, so I shouldn't do that anymore. Maybe I'm not good at being an entrepreneur. Maybe I should just go back to work. No, it just means that you learn from the mistake that you made. You price correct it if you need to, or if the product's not viable, you just put it back on the shelf and you don't do anything else with it. Okay, but that you don't use that as an excuse not to do anything. You just move on and correct yourself. So, I told y'all this was not going to be long. I'm really trying to put my reps in by going live. I do have a YouTube channel where I talk about all of this stuff in detail. But of course, the YouTube channel, I can stop it, I can correct myself and edit. But I'm really trying to take my content creation to the next level and also improve my communication to the next level. And going live is going to help me with that because, as you can see, there's no stopping and pausing and correcting and editing. It's just 100% raw. It's sometimes I'm looking in the computer, other times I'm looking in the camera. So just trying to do to get better at that. And then also, what I want people to know too is because you may look at this live, like right now I'm looking at the live and it says only 2 people are on here. And I don't know how this all works because I told you it was a lag, but I know I have myself pulled up on both of my phones. So I could very well be the only 2 people that's watching this live right now. And you may say, well, Renata, you did all this work, you spent your time. Does that make you feel any kind of way? And the answer is no. Y'all, you have to put your reps in. And the best time to put in your reps, the best time to make mistakes is when nobody's watching. Okay? Because at some point, if you do it long enough, if you run with it long enough, if you're consistent with it long enough, if you're disciplined with it long enough, that 2 people is going to turn to 200. That 200 is going to turn into 2,000. That 2,000 is going to turn into 20,000. And then that's when you're going to be very prepared because guess what? You didn't get prepared the night before you spoke and got on a live with 20,000 people. You got better when you were speaking to 2 people, when you were speaking to 4 people, when you're speaking to 6 people. So don't get discouraged if you don't have the following that you're looking for. Don't get discouraged if you don't have the people watching on live like you want to. Don't get discouraged if you've already launched your business and you've only got one client, or if you have no clients. Trust me, it took me 18 months. So just don't get discouraged out there. If it's something that you really want to do and you really know that you're going to be good at, and you just keep pushing at it. And also find yourself a coach. This is not a plug for me because I'm not selling anything tonight. This is not a plug, but get yourself a coach. I don't understand why people are adamant about going through something and figuring it out on their own when somebody else has already did it. You can read books. I'm actually reading Sam Walton's Made in America. It is the longest book ever. Okay, I'm almost finished. I'm like 40 pages from being finished, but it is really a really good book, and he talks about customer service. He talks about a store in a store, meaning they've got all of these stores, but he treats each one of them individually, or he did. And so those are the type things that you can just go to the library and you can read these for free. Of course, I ordered all mine off of Amazon, but nevertheless, there's information out here that you can learn from somebody else that you don't have to go through all those pitfalls. Another thing, I'm going to GrowthCon in Las Vegas in March, and that is where with Grant Cardone. So there's going to be a lot of guest speakers and people that's in the building that's multimillionaire people. And sometimes you need to be around that type energy just to get yourself rejuvenated, see what is possible out there, see real people that's making it happen and living the life that maybe you want to live. So another thing, just make sure you pick the right networking events. Sometimes they're networking so you can get clients, and sometimes it's just networking so that you can get in the right headspace and the right mind space. So I am going to end that. It is 7:24. If nobody caught it live, or you can always come back and you can catch it on my Facebook page. But again, if you're thinking about transitioning from your current job into a consultant role or any kind of entrepreneurial space, feel free to reach out to me. Hopefully this video was helpful to tell you how I got my journey started, how you actually look for opportunities, and how you can actually capitalize on that. So good night, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow for the third and final live event of this series. Good night.